that vibrate.
So, John has to introduce me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second to last artist lecture at PNCA Low-Residency MFA in Digital Studies, and we'll just get right on to it with the introduction. Should I do it from here? Okay, because I have a mic. Hi,
Exactly.
I'd like to introduce Ruth Estévez. She currently works between Los Angeles and Mexico City. She's the curator, writer, and stage designer. She's part of the curatorial team of the 34th Biennial in Sao Paulo, curator at Brandeis University's Rose Arts Museum, and former director and curator at Red Cat Cal Arts in Los Angeles. She has curated many exhibitions like Hotel Theory and Chalk Circles, which analyze acting methods in the 20th century. Tonight she's going to introduce the work of Argentinian artist Leon Ferrari, specifically his literary collage, The Words of Others.
Okay.
So, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So this is going to be a very special lecture because I'm not going to talk, although they know I love to talk. But this time, I mean, we has been working these days I was working with them to prepare this performance. So in the next few minutes, what we are going to start with a performance that, as John was saying, is called Palabras Ajenas, was in English is The Words of Others. And it's a literary collage by the Argentinian artist Leon Ferrari, an artist that died a few years ago. It was a cult figure in Latin America. He got attention almost at the end of his life, having like a major retrospective at MoMA and winning the Golden Lion in Venice. But most of his career, like many Latin American artists, was pretty much local until in a certain moment everybody decided in the mainstream that he was great. But it was a little bit at the end of his career. So this is a part of research I started in 2015 as when I was the director at Red Cat, and it was part of the Pacific Standard Time Los Angeles Latin America, who was an initiative by the Getty Research Institute. And basically it was, although Leon Ferrari is very specific research, because although Leon Ferrari is well known today for being a visual artist, working with painting, sculpture, always also an activist, always very committed to the political situation in Argentina during the dictatorship. His son was killed during these years, and I think most of his work has been always against the political regimes and dictatorships over the world. But during his life, he wrote a few books, a few what he called literary collages, that were basically completely unknown when I got them, and I thought. And after talking with Leon, although it was already quite old when we were talking about that, actually I invited him to participate almost 2 weeks before he died. So it was really very intense. I think for me they are central to understand his practice, and he called it literary collage because they are something between a reading, a performance, a theatrical piece, but this is difficult to define. So basically, The Words of Others, what you are going to see today is a little excerpt of a 10 hours performance. It's a performance that we have been performing in many different places, first at Red Cat, at the PAM in Miami, at the Reina Sofia in Madrid, at the Bogota University, in St. Petersburg. So it's a piece that we created for Red Cat, but that has been traveling all over the world for different reasons. And in each place have different implications and a different readings. So just to explain it very quickly, Ferrari The Words of Others is a Vietnam era anti-war piece because he wrote it in the 60s in the form of a sort of dramatic script. So Ferrari created the work by cutting and assembling text. and quotation from different sources. It was a work that he did for almost 5 years without even thinking about creating this piece. This is something that he decided at the end. And all these quotes are coming from news agencies, history books, the Bible, and speeches by political and religious figures as President Lyndon Johnson, Robert McNamara, Pope Paul VI, Adolf Hitler, and many, many other political leaders of that time. So basically, by means of this cut and paced exercise, the artist wanted to correlate in a way the atrocities of the Vietnam War, the horror of Nazism, and the representations of redemption and punishment in the Christian doctrine and the Western thought. So when what we realized is like, although this piece was composed like already 50 years ago, the text is profoundly contemporary, and this is something that we have been experimenting when I don't know, we can think about it. And I think also this performance but it came also when we presented in 2017 at a moment when critical discussion about political rhetoric and the manipulation of the media seems to be more urgent than ever, no? So I have been extremely pleased to work with you guys these days. I hope it has not been too hard and me like talking and talking for so many hours, but I think the updating of this text for me is not like really, I think that how these texts get updated in a way is through the bodies of the people that is reading and through the bodies of the people that is listening, no? That you can realize how similar the situations are in a way. And well, I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to pass the microphone there, and hopefully it's a good sound. We don't have microphones for everyone, but hope it works. So I should put it here. It's fine? Okay. So you can start whatever you want.
The Pope will travel to New York.
The Pope will pray for peace at Yankee Stadium and will pray for peace before the United Nations General Assembly.
The Pope's mission is simply to arouse the moral conscience of mankind to the imperative necessity of averting war.
The ticket costs him $890 round trip to New York, first class. The documents list Giambattista Montini, single, 68 years old, but the ticket was issued to Sua Santini, Santita Paul VI.
President Johnson and Pope Paul VI, both ardent advocates of peace, will meet during this historic visit.
But the risks, they said in Rome, the danger of involving the church in political struggles.
Johnson will come to New York.
Paul VI departed at 5:30, headed to New York from Fiumicino Airport.
Johnson traveled by plane from Kansas City.
The Union continues its Great Peace Offensive.
Hundreds of explosions lit up the sky as if it were an aurora borealis. The grave thunder of bombs dropped by the attackers could be heard almost every second. One of the attackers was captured by the searchlights, and immediately all the anti-aircraft barriers in the district opened heavy fire. However, some dive bombers managed to pass under the area where anti-aircraft shells were exploding and flew at full speed, dropping 20 to 30 bombs in a densely populated area of the lower Thames before resuming flight.
I will give the attack order personally, in any case.
A military spokesman said the Air Force acted on direct orders from President Johnson.
The Fuhrer perfectly understands the full implications of the great opportunity offered by this war. We are fighting a battle of gigantic dimensions. The fate of the entire civilized world depends upon its outcome.
Hell on earth is a very graphic phrase to describe the spectacle of desolation that the London suburbs offer. Whole blocks of humble houses, large buildings, roads, streets are nothing but piles of stone, crumbling walls.
The charred walls of the school have flown through the air, and the muddy soil is furrowed by a monstrous wagon. Here and there, huge craters confess their stupor to crews of up to 50 super fortresses that often thunder across the place. There are no more signs of life than the worms emerging from the turned soil and the figures of a few women, quick, frightened, disappearing into the dense brush, carrying a yoke across their shoulders.
10-row houses were demolished, burying their occupants, whose cries of pain could be heard from the street. However, the daytime air activity was nothing compared to last night's attack, which took on the proportions of a real offensive, comparable only to the bombing last September that marked the beginning of Blitzkrieg.
In a village of huts in Quinhoa province, an old woman lies dying, broiled lobster red from napalm.
The countryside surrounding the ancient Basque capital is littered with twisted carcasses of dead cattle, alternating here and there with the body of a neighbor who tried to escape the bombing, only to fall victim of the low-flying planes.
In another hamlet, a 10-year-old girl, driven mad from the explosions of mortar grenades, runs screaming from her house across the paddy field, stark naked.
Military targets have been the only targets that we have attacked. There's no blood in a bridge made of concrete and steel. I do wonder how some people can be so concerned with our bombing a cold bridge of steel and concrete in North Vietnam, but never open their mouths about a bomb being placed in our embassy in South Vietnam.
The president remarked that the raids were carried out in such a way so that areas inhabited by civilians would not be damaged, and called the communist accusations that these areas have been attacked, resulting in loss of life among civilians, evil and inaccurate.
This issue of the bombing of northern Vietnam has a lot to do with peace.
I have always desired peace. We had need of peace. We have been jockeyed into war. It has been imposed on us at the desire of our adversaries.
Venerable brothers, beloved sons of our Catholic Rome, faithful of all the church, and also you, Christians, who have split from the church, but who believe with us in Christ the risen. All you good men who are listening to our Easter message, rejoice, rejoice, because this is the day the Lord has signaled to welcome the great message of hope and joy.
In the Mekong Delta.
The message you well know, this is Christ is risen. On the third day after his death, Christ has returned to life. Christ has conquered death.
In the Mekong Delta.
Christ has entered true and real immortality. Christ has fulfilled the prophetic word of his resurrection. Christ the Lord lives and will live forever. Optimism prevails. Happiness exists and can be conquered.
The only job I want them to do is find Viet Cong and kill them. We got one today.
The fullness of our being unfolds in all its potential perfection, increased yet further by an additional capacity, lumen gloria, to love more, to enjoy more, in the inexhaustible intoxication that the vision of God is assured to us. Hope and joy should characterize the spiritual life of a man found on Christ.
May God help us in this fight.
Whoever wins, wins.
Whoever has, has. He who returns what he has destroyed himself, for he surrenders what he, as the strongest, painfully conquered from the land. Land is like a traveling trophy. Its fate is always to fall into the hands of the strongest.
Our nation is strong now, the strongest in the world.
Men dispossesses one another, and at the end of it all, it is always the stronger who triumphs. Is it not the most reasonable order of things?
Whoever wins, wins.
Whoever has, has.
I want a joint attack. I want it to be prompt. I want it to be appropriate.
Whoever has, has.
Whoever wins, wins.
Is that not the most reasonable order of things? If it were otherwise, nothing good would ever have existed. If we did not respect the laws of nature, imposing our will by the right of the stronger, a day would come when the wild animals would once again devour us. Then the insects would eat the wild animals, and finally, nothing would exist on earth but the microbes.
Operation White Wing.
Operation Rice Bowl.
Operation Search and Destroy.
Yet the infirmities of man are such that force must often precede reason, and the waste of war the works of peace.
What is your main objective as president?
To make a better life, more enjoyable and more significant for all the 3 billion people of the world. We've got a moral duty, a Christian duty to work with our neighbors. We've got to do it now. Our mandate will soon expire.
Would you recommend the use of atomic bombs in Vietnam?
Sometimes the use of force can be love disguised as force.
McNamara to Vietnam.
Johnson to Vietnam.
Spellman to Vietnam.
Perhaps the wisest words about the much debated present issue were those pronounced by Cardinal Spellman upon his arrival in Saigon.
The old and experienced prelate and said simply,
I fully support my country and I pray it will always be right. But it is my country, right or wrong.
This is the universal code of force and strength. There is no universal code for weakness and defeat. There is only one destiny for that defeat, and it is to die out and disappear. This law has reigned since the world began to exist.
This is a selective process of nature. Ultimately, we are, as always, in a continuous struggle against the world, against nature, and against gods, and only the strongest survive.
Oh, allow us to rekindle in the world the message of Easter exaltation. It moves for announcement to well wishes, from well wishes to prophecy, to aspiration at least, and to prelude, for its intrinsic virtue, to a regeneration of human history, present in view of the resurrection of human life in eternity.
I am a free man, an American, a senator, and a Democrat, in that order. I am also a liberal, a conservative, a Texan, a taxpayer, a rancher, an entrepreneur, a consumer, a parent, a voter, and not as young as I used to be, nor as old as I expect to be. And I am all these things in no established order. What's your political philosophy?
I am an admirer of Hitler.
We do only what is useful for our people.
The United States is always prepared to protect its national interests.
Do you think the U.S. is destined to continue being the policeman for peace in the whole world?
I made my visit to Paris very early in the morning, between 8 and 9. I wanted to abstain from exciting people with my presence. The first news vendor who recognized me stood with his mouth open. I still remember clearly the image of that woman from Lille who, after seeing me from her window, began to shout, "The devil!"
Do you think that any increased ground action calls for greater commitment of U.S. troops?
There is no greater privilege, in my view, than to play the part of a patron of the arts or the sciences. In time, wars are forgotten.
We in America have not always been good to artists and scholars. For some reason, scientists always seem to be higher up, whereas those in the arts and humanities remain in the basement.
Last week, the president took steps to move the artists and scholars upstairs under a sparkling autumn sun in the rose garden of the White House. He signed a 3-year, $3 million bill recreating a national foundation for the arts and humanities that will sponsor new theater troupes.
I had intended to write a play.
Opera and ballet.
Then Hitler started to talk about the art of dance.
We should recognize that Americans can present female dancers who have real talent, something we cannot do. Female dancers must be educated, in music first and foremost, and not just intellectually.
The activity of partisans has increased noticeably during recent weeks. They are conducting a well-organized guerrilla war. It is very difficult to get them because they are using such terrorist methods in the areas occupied by us that the population is afraid of collaborating with us any longer. The spearheads of this whole partisan activity are the political commissars, and especially the Jews.
Puzzling paradox. For the signing ceremonies, Lyndon corralled 100 congressmen and 300 artists, scholars, and entertainers, a gathering illustrious enough to please the pickiest patron. Among the guests were painters de Kooning and Ben Shahn, novelist Catherine Ann Porter, poetess Marianne Moore, architects Edward Durrell Stone and Walter Gropius, actor Alfred Lunt, and Frederick March. Also invited but conspicuously absent was playwright Arthur Mills, who, like the poet Robert Lowell on a similar occasion last June, sent his regrets and for good measure sent Lyndon Johnson a nasty little note condemning U.S. policy in Vietnam. To Broadway producer David Merrick, Miller's headline-making snub was a slap in the face of the president.
The problem of terrorism is spreading everywhere.
At any rate, Miller's boycott of the president's pointed up a paradox that forever puzzles the president. He has persuaded Congress to pass bills promoting causes dear to intellectuals. He has assiduously courted the cerebral community and has shown almost childlike gratitude when it responded to him wooing. But for all that, much of the intellectual world still regards him with hostility and even scorn.
Who can escape criticism?
Many people fell victim to a terrorist attack in Saigon The bloody act was perpetrated in a restaurant on the river with 2 loads of explosives.
The cruelest terrorist attack of the current war destroyed a floating restaurant on the Saigon River tonight and caused the death of a large number of people. According to official accounts, the death toll reached 29, but some eyewitnesses stated this figure could rise to 50.
How Hitler escaped death is still not clear.
The explosions occurred around 8:15 p.m. One was caused by an electric mine planted in the riverbank. A second blast is believed to have been caused by a bomb mounted on a bicycle and went off at a tobacco stall on the dock.
Hitler rose immediately, furious, foaming at the mouth and screaming that he would take revenge on all traitors. Screaming, he announced terrible punishments, not only for men, but also for their wives and children, all of whom would end up in concentration camps, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Johnson asserted the military activities in Vietnam came down to an eye for an eye.
An eye for an eye.
Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
An eye for an eye.
Eye for an eye.
The next offensive will be a retaliation as a result of the severe losses suffered by the Americans in recent weeks.
Dozens of U.S. warplanes smashed at military targets in North Vietnam on the second day of attacks designed to punish the communists for their terror attacks on Americans.
The Union announced severe retaliations in Vietnam.
Retaliations of the Union.
Eye.
Eye.
Eye. Tooth.
More troops from the United States arrive in Vietnam.
Chiang Kai-shek would send troops to Vietnam.
South Korea will send more troops to Vietnam.
I am content with Australia's decision to send 350 more soldiers to Vietnam.
The Fuhrer was very pleased, and his satisfaction increased even more vividly when he heard from the lips of Himmler himself that the SS would be joined by about 50,000 Dutch, French, Danish, Swedish,
American, Australian, New Zealander, and South Vietnamese troops, advancing today through the jungles of Vietnam.
Keep an eye on Thailand. It could be the next explosion.
The U.S. government asked its embassies in Bogota and Caracas for detailed files on local guerrillas because it fears a new Vietnam might emerge there.
In Guatemala, police and guerrillas fought fiercely. Law enforcement agents were backed by helicopters, tanks, and heavy weapons.
The State Department observes the events in Bolivia with interest. The guerrillas are active in Venezuela.
Peru enacts an anti-communism law.
6 dead in Chile in the unrest caused by the mining conflict.
American Marines in the Dominican capital.
Bolivia deports another 40 Union leaders.
There was serious unrest in Ecuador.
Question, can the U.S., the #1 world power, find enough troops and money to police the whole world virtually alone?
It would be ridiculous not to bring order to this continent.
Vietnam.
Laos.
Thailand,
Formosa.
Berlin,
Korea.
Congo.
Cuba.
the Dominican Republic.
Lebanon.
These are but a few of the places girdling the globe where the threat of war in recent times has required a U.S. military presence on the ground, in the air or at sea, in combat or standing by.
Pax Americana.
Senator McGovern, what was your impression of the political situation in South Vietnam?
I received a report on the way the Japanese are treating the inhabitants of the countries they occupy. It makes one green with envy to realize how cleverly the Japanese do that sort of thing in East Asia. They have everywhere installed national governments which naturally are tied to the apron strings of the Japanese military commander, but which nevertheless keep the semblance of national liberty. Why do we not do the same in the East?
Do you think the president can go over Kai's head?
Hitler pondered and said,
The information we have received about ancient Rome attests that the food of the soldiers consisted principally of fruits and cereals. The Roman soldier rejected meat. The prints we have of them now show that they had excellent teeth, and this seems to contradict the contention that only eating meat can human teeth remain healthy. If we look back at children belonging to vegetarian tribes, we see that they develop better than other little black children because mothers feed their infants up to the age of 5. When the man eats only vegetables, he must remember that it is in their natural state that vegetables have their greatest nutritive value, that is, raw. Just as the little fly feeds on fresh leaves, the frog swallows the fly, and the stork eats the frog, and truly rational diet should be based on eating things in their raw state.
A tiger ate an American soldier.
The earth continues to go round. What difference does it make if it's the man who kills the tiger or the tiger who kills the man? The stronger asserts his will. It's the law of nature. The world doesn't change. Its laws are eternal.
Shoot all tigers you find in the jungle.
People ask the question, why is it necessary to drop so much in the South? Is anything going to be left when you are finished?
I suppose that some people are clutching their heads with both hands to find an answer to this question. How can the Fuhrer destroy a city like St. Petersburg? Plainly, I belong by nature to quite another species. I would prefer not to see anyone suffer, not to do harm to anyone. But when I realize that the species is in danger, then in my case sentiment gives way to the coldest reason. I become sensitive only to the sacrifices the future demands.
I don't think things will look up until our enemy's been convinced they cannot win.
How will they be convinced?
Power, power on land, power in the air, power wherever it is necessary.
I will have my people build submarines, 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 submarines. I will build aircrafts. I will build aircrafts, 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 and I will annihilate all my enemies.
In this way, the communists will be convinced of our unbreakable resolve.
I'm not entirely certain what President Johnson's objectives are. If his objective is to negotiate and get out of Vietnam as quickly as possible, then the best option is to make this type of threat. We're going to bomb you and keep bombing you, and you won't know when we'll stop.
One must act radically. When one pulls out a tooth, one does it with a single tug, and the pain quickly goes away. The Jew must clear out of Europe. Otherwise, no understanding will be possible between Europeans. It's the Jew who prevents everything. They must go away.
There is a certain number of Americans who are just waiting for an excuse to bomb Chinese facilities right this moment.
When I go into an establishment where people are smoking, within an hour I feel I've caught a cold. The microbes hurl themselves upon me. They find a favorable climate in the smoke and heat.
The spearheads of this whole partisan activity are the political commissars and especially the Jews. It is therefore proven necessary once again to shoot more Jews. There won't be any peace in these areas as long as any Jews are active there. Sentimentality is out of place here.
And above all, no remorse.
It's necessary, really, to do things 100%.
The natives will have to be sifted out.
Mr. Khan is sending troops to the Dominican Republic comparable in our actions in Vietnam?
No, it's very different, and I think it's much more debatable.
Could it be viable in small Latin American countries?
Perhaps in the Caribbean islands, in Central American countries, or maybe in Bolivia and Ecuador, but not in larger nations. Also, there is an issue where the United, if one does not resolve to stand firm, intervention makes no sense whatsoever.
The strongest has reason on his side. Harshness, first condition.
What do you mean by harsh?
What lovely women there are in the world.
We can tell Latin Americans we are not interested in the form of government you have.
Do you think there would ever be a nuclear war?
Alma sends me a postcard from Bad Harzburg. The first news I have of her since that night. This teasing, charming Alma. How much I like the girl. I received Elsa's first letter from Switzerland. Only Elsa could write like that. Soon I'm going to the Rhine for a week, to be quite alone. Then Elsa will come visit me. How happy I am in anticipation.
What will happen when many countries possess an atomic bomb?
These days I often think of Anka. Why just now? Because it is a favorable time to travel? How wonderful it is to travel with her.
Perhaps for communist China?
I'm yearning Elsa. When shall I have her in my arms again? Elsa, dear. When shall I see you again? Alma, you dear featherweight. I will never forget you, dear Anka. And now, I'm here so lonesome. 3 days on the Rhine. I'm feeling lazy, with nothing else to do but walk and sleep. Not a word from Elsa. Did she fail to receive my postcard? Or is she angry with me? How I miss her. I'm staying in the same room where I stayed with her last Pentecost. What memories and feelings. Why doesn't she come? I'm at the Rhine, waiting for you. Come, oh come, my dear, and bless me. Why did Anka have to leave me nearly alone? Is it a broken pledge? On her part or mine? I mustn't think about these things. Birthday. I'm getting old. I understand that today with a shudder. My hair is getting thinner. I will be bald. But I want to continue for all eternity to remain young at heart. Last night I was with Hess in Crayfield. We celebrated Christmas. A delightful, beautiful girl from Franconia. She's my type. I think about making a home with her amid rain and storm. Au revoir.
In France?
Plus jamais la guerre, plus jamais.
Y un poco después recibí un mensaje del secretario de guerra anunciándome que mi hijo estaba missing después de haber intervenido en una operación en helicóptero. A los 2 días llegó otro telegrama del mismo ministerio especificando que el muchacho había muerto y que procuraban enterrarme los restos. Otros padres están recibiendo comunicaciones semejantes con más frecuencia cada vez. ¿Puede alguno de ustedes explicarme por qué?
Life is cruel. To be born, to exist, to disappear. The issue is always death. He who is born must die, whether from disease, due to an accident, or at war. The fact doesn't change.
Our nation was created to help strike away the chains of ignorance, of misery, and of tyranny wherever they keep man below the God meant him to be.
We now carry in our hands the torch that brings life to the march of humanity.
This nation is mighty enough. Its society is healthy enough. Its people are strong enough to pursue our goals in the rest of the world while at the same time building a great society here at home.
But beloved children, what is this?
The girl with her head in bandages was burned by napalm in a U.S. bombing raid.
Cruelty imposes respect.
Tucked away in their hammocks beneath the dripping rainforest canopy, the Viet Cong guerrillas could hardly believe their ears. Out of the night sky came an ominous, warbling whine, like bagpipes punctuated with cymbals. It was a Buddhist funeral music, a dissonant dirge cascading from the darkness, then a dialogue, mother and child speaking.
Mother, where is Daddy?
Don't ask me that. I'm very worried about him.
But I miss Daddy very much. Why is he gone so long?
Then the music and voices faded slowly into the distance, and the platoon settled back into a restless sleep. It was, of course, only one of the many musical shows that the Viet Cong are treated to every day, courtesy of the JS POW planes and the Joint United States Public Affairs Office, which directs psychological warfare in South Vietnam from the powerful loudspeakers of the JUS PAO planes. Funeral songs are broadcast each night like howling, blanketing the Viet Cong strongholds, along with tape-recorded cries of little children, and weird electronic cacophonies intended to raise terrifying images of the forest demons among the superstitious terrorists.
We don't see any sign that indicates Hanno's willingness to enter peace talks, and the Secretary of State says he will recognize those signs should they appear. His insights are very extremely sensitive.
It remains a mystery as to when the mass bombing of Great Britain will begin.
The peace offensive will go on for 10 days. That will be the deadline for Hanoi to negotiate.
Armageddon will be swift to arrive.
Since they don't want to love us, they must learn to fear us.
Peace or bombs.
We have said repeatedly that we prefer words to bullets, discussion to fighting, and this is because we are convinced that the era has already passed when the problems of humanity should be resolved in the battlefield.
Your name?
Hermann Wilhelm Göring,
Your position and activities?
Officer and Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, Air Minister, Premier of Prussia, President of the Reichstag, Minister of Forestry, Marshal of the Reich.
We do not seek to overthrow, overtly or covertly, the legitimate government of any nation, and we are opposed to such attempts by others. In short, we seek a world where each is free to develop according to his own desires, unmolested by his neighbors, free of fear of armed attack from the more powerful nations. We must face up the fact that communists have a distinct advantage over the democracies in this type of conflict. They are not inhibited by our ethical and moral standards. Political assassinations, robbery, arson, subversion, bribery are all acceptable means to further their ends. It is not solely a military problem. It is coming together of every aspect of human endeavor and concern, political, social, ideological, and economic. The road ahead will be difficult, and continuing sacrifice will be required of our people, both in money and in lives. But the challenge must surely be met. If we fail to do this here and now, we will have to confront it later under even more disadvantageous conditions. This is the clear lesson of history which can ignore only at our peril.
When the Western Union messenger got there, Anne McManus knew what it was right away. It was early evening, and she was at home with her 3-year-old son in Pine Terrace, a familiar vista of look-alike bungalows in Columbus, Georgia, where so many 1st Cavalry families had lived during their tours in Fort Benning. In recent weeks, Western Union had been a frequent visitor to that region, and when the messenger knocked, Anne McManus knew what it was, because there was nobody else who would be sending a wire.
I went to the door,
She recalled in a wan Puerto Rican voice.
and he handed it to me, and then he waited until I read it. When I finished reading it, he asked if there was anything he could do. I said no. Then he went and asked one of the neighbors if she could come and stay with me. She came.
And this was the way for Anna McManus, that a battlefield statistic reach her, a cipher, one dead, Charles V. McManus, age 30, 6 feet tall, 185 pounds, a staff sergeant, a veteran of the Korean War, a soldier for 12 years, a husband for nearly 5, a father for 3. He was on a search and destroy operation, said the telegram, when he was hit by hostile small arms fire.
Behold, I send an angel before thee, to keep thee in the way, and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him, and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice, and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and I will afflict those who afflict you. For mine angel shall go before thee, and bring thee unto the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off.
Greetings to you, Americans. The first pope to set foot on your land blesses you.
The sword is sharpened.
The Pontiff Paul VI spoke in New York City before the United Nations Assembly.
A sword is sharpened, and also furbished.
At 3:30, for half an hour, delegates from the 114 member countries of the United Nations shall hear the Pontiff's friendly admonishments, exhorting them to consider peace.
A sword is sharpened, and also furbished to slaughter.
As we begin to speak to this audience that is unique in the whole world, we must first of all express our profound thanks to you, your Secretary General, who was kind enough to invite us to pay a visit to the United Nations on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of this organization for peace and collaboration between the nations of the whole world.
Torture in Vietnam. Behind the headlines about the aerial attacks against North Vietnam and the large guerrilla operations in South Vietnam, dozens of episodes are hidden, undisclosed, constituting the routine work of war. This sequence of photographs from the UPI shows the capture and interrogation of a suspect in an operation to shut down guerrilla fighters in Vietnam. Undertaken by an army detachment from South Vietnam in a region of An Ninh, located 3 kilometers north of Saigon, the adventures of this man without a name began when the soldiers crossed the river and detained as suspects many men and women who work in the fields and had hidden in the jungle. These men and even women could be guerrilla fighters with mortal aim. The weapons do not appear, and with a map and with a smile, and an official begins to interrogate one of the suspects. The can of water is already prepared, but the suspect says he does not know any of the hideout or the weapons. One of the soldiers loses his patience and kicks the suspect. The others, still just adolescents, consider the scene casually. Before the water, torture with a rod is attempted. With his heavy boot, one soldier stands on the rod, suffocating the suspect. The man continues his denials, and the treatment rises to a new level, now with the water. The suspect is subjected to the water torture. As long as he does not state what his captors wish to know, the detainee is obliged to gulp down large quantities of water. When he can no longer tolerate the punishment, he will be interrogated. If he does not say what is expected of him, he will be forced to drink more water again. The torture victim's expression of terror is hidden beneath the canvas. His captors wish to know where a Viet Cong weapons hideout is located, but the detainee continues to claim that he knows nothing.
And yet, As we were telling you, and you can all sense it, this moment is ripe with a unique greatness. It is great for us, it is great for you, for us, first of all.
The United States should liberate itself from superstition that in order to be good international policy should have the approval of the United Nations. This part of our liberation from the clutches of the world public opinion.
Would you be so kind as to tell the courts the system that was followed in order to select those elements, and in what way it was decided who among the prisoners should be killed?
We also make our voice the voice of the poor, the disinherited, the unfortunate, those who long for justice, the dignity of life, liberty, well-being, and progress.
The Nong and Chinese mercenaries from Formosa, they've received good salaries for fighting in defense of the government in Saigon. They always asked for the wires from sea ration cans. Do you know why? When a man from Viet Cong is in their power, they make him hold his hand against his cheek. Then they take the wire and run it right through one hand and the corresponding cheek. In this way, they put it in the prisoner's mouth and pull it through the other cheek and the other hand, and they knot both ends. You've never seen a prisoner like that? Oh, you don't know how quietly they sit in that helicopter when they wrap them up like that.
Were all the victims killed, men, women, and children, using the same systems?
Anyone who has spent a certain amount of time in the combat zones has seen prisoners' heads held underwater, throats crushed by bayonets, victims with bamboo, splinters buried under their fingernails, telephone wires hooked to arms, nipples, or testicles.
Never again war. Never again war. Peace. It is peace that must guide the destinies of peoples of all mankind.
In Buchenwald, tests were made with phosphorus burns, sex hormones, and hunger edemas.
Techniques employed to force prisoners to talk include cutting off their fingers, ears, fingernails, or sexual organs, or those of another prisoner.
Women were highly valued as objects for experimentation.
In the case of women, the electrodes are attached to the nipples.
A string of ears decorated the wall of a government military office.
In Buchenwald, prisoners who had tattoo marks were killed. Their skin was removed, cured, and made into lampshades and souvenirs.
One American officer has a Viet Cong ear preserved in alcohol.
All thanks to you. All to honor you who have been working for peace for 20 years and have given distinguished victims to this holy cause.
Who placed the rope around the children's neck?
The United Nations is the great school where people get this education.
How long did the hanging of the children take?
And we are here in the assembly hall of that school.
Did you hang only one child at a time or several?
Anyone who takes his place here becomes a pupil and eventually a teacher in the art of building peace.
How many children did you hang from these hooks on each occasion?
As you know very well, peace is not built merely by means of politics and a balance of power and interests.
Go your ways and pour out the 7 vials of the wrath of God upon the earth.
Sometimes the use of force is love disguised as force.
So you hung around 10 children.
Et homo pactus est. Crucifixus etiam pro nobis sub Ponte Pilato passus et sepultus est.
Tell me, did you also hang adults in pairs?
Id resurrexis tertiae secundum scripturas et castellum caelum, sedet ad steram patris, et iterum ventus est cum gloria, judicare vivos et mortus, cujus regum non erit finis, et in spiritum sanctum Dominum et vivificant.
Is it true that later on you were given a reward like cigarettes and alcoholic beverages?
Bigger and better GI benefits, free trips, free education, free insurance. Help of all sorts now goes to the soldiers and veterans of the war in Vietnam.
There is no doubt that our young American, a product of our free society, takes great pride in doing the job that is assigned to him. He is a man with a purpose. This young American in Vietnam takes pride in doing a job, takes pride in having those traits and that have been so characteristic of Americans over the years: resourcefulness, courage, and dedication to a just cause. In summary, he possesses these traditional characteristics to the degree that one would expect of a product of our American society.
In Hanoi, at the same time, the authorities paraded 50 captured United States pilots through the streets. The walk took place amidst calls for vengeance from the residents of Hanoi, who in the last few days are living in an atmosphere of tension due to the frequent anti-aircraft alarms.
The United States is too strong to be afraid and too determined to be defeated.
We're ready for everything, resolved to everything, and prepared to act at any moment.
What would you do in my place?
If the British Air Force drops 2, 3, or 4,000 kilos of bombs, we will drop 150,000, 180,000, 230,000, 300,000, or 400,000 kilos of bombs or more in a single night.
Do you mean conventional bombs
I
or
could have-
atom bombs?
I could have bombed again last night.
Conventional bombs or atom bombs?
We will attack them with such masses that they will be left flattened.
Conventional bombs or atom bombs?
We could just completely demolish them.
Atom bombs?
The last person in the world that should be promised we won't use nuclear weapons in our enemy in Vietnam, they ought to go to bed every night thinking that we'll use them.
I did not initiate the war. I inherited it.
I have not wanted the war.
We didn't start it. We didn't intervene. We didn't kill anyone. We were not the perpetrators, but once we knew what had happened, we took the necessary precautions. Since, as I have said repeatedly, and I repeat again, we are not going to bury anyone. We don't intend to, but we are not going to let ourselves be buried.
It pains my conscience when I have the feeling that I have not been fair with someone.
Things are different today.
As for me, I must say that when I find myself with children, I think of them as if they were my own children. They all belong to me.
I want to know, how much rice are we producing?
You are a farmer, isn't it true?
50 years ago, I was a boy lost in the rural heart of Texas, faced with the problem of knowing whether there would ever be an opportunity for me beyond these hills.
It would always be a great time when an entirely unknown man can set out to conquer a nation, and when after 15 years of struggle, he can indeed come to lead it.
I'm reminded always in my work in Washington of my own origins. I was born into the hill country of Texas, a remote region then, still remote today.
How are things in your land?
Our nation is strong, the strongest in the world. Our people have never been so universally well educated. The peril has not ended, nor will it end soon. Our enemies abroad are implacable. The destructive elements of hate and suspicion among us at home are relentless. We must not underestimate either danger, nor compromise either, nor appease either. Americans will neither be pulverized by the communists nor demoralized by the extremists. America will still be thriving when the last chains of communism have rusted into dust. America knows this. The American spirit is not cowering in terror or quaking in doubt.
Complaints about the CIA's activity.
The CIA's subsidy would also have come to include journalism.
I am horrified by inquisition and espionage.
More accusations were presented against the CIA in the U.S.
CIA operations abroad are incredibly varied. CIA men control an entire airline, Air America, in charge of transportation and operations in Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. They sometimes search for tiny scraps of information. They sometimes organize revolutions, like the one that defeated Prime Minister Musada in 1953, or that which ousted Coronel Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala in 1954.
The resistance must be destroyed by any means. The secret police and the security service must do their part to support the army in this task.
The CIA is only a part of the big U.S. intelligence network. 9 separate agencies gather intelligence for the American government. They are the CIA, FBI, NSA, I&R, AEC, DIA, AFNIN, G2, ONI, and the USIB.
This means taking a census so that you have everyone listed.
Latin America is an important area of activity for the CIA, which was saddled by some critics with much of the blame for the Bay of Pigs debacle in Fidel Castro's Cuba in 1961.
The big net, the fine mesh net, the sifting out.
I see in Himmler are Ignatius de Loyola.
Would you order an atomic attack on Hiroshima
I would do it again without the slightest hesitation.
A nation has the right to employ any weapon against its enemies, even atomic weapons.
I ordered the 2 atomic bombs to be dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the trip back to Potsdam while we were in the middle of the Atlantic.
It would be ridiculous not to use the practical weapons at our disposal.
We should commit to becoming the guardians of this new force to prevent its misuse in order to direct it towards aims that will be useful to mankind.
We have an arsenal that includes the entire catalog of modern weapons, and I personally believe that this is what the government believes, that we should use these weapons that are best suited for the situation we may face.
When you talk about bombing North Vietnam, do you mean with conventional bombs or atom bombs?
Shoot the sons of bitches.
However, he acknowledged that the goal of the United States was to achieve peace.
Peace, peace, peace.
Peace, peace, peace.
Peace, peace, peace,
Of peace.
For peace.
Toward peace,
peace,
Peace.
of peace,
In peace.
is peace.
a peace.
And peace to peace. Peace with peace.
Peace or bombs?
Bombs.
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 38,000 tons of bombs.
I am the bread of life.
Bombs.
I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Bombs.
I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Bombs.
I am the true vine, and my Father
Bombs.
is the husbandman.
Bombs.
I wound and I heal.
Bombs.
The silver is mine and the gold is mine.
Bombs.
To me belongeth vengeance.
Bombs.
The great day of Jehovah is near.
Bombs.
It is near and hast this
Bombs.
bitter voice of Jehovah's
Bombs.
day of wrath that day.
Bombs.
A day of trouble and distress.
Bombs.
A day of wasteness and desolation.
Bombs.
A day of darkness and gloominess.
Bombs.
A day of clouds and thick darkness.
Bombs.
I will make mine arrows drunk with blood.
Bombs.
And my sword shall devour flesh. The
Bombs.
blood of the slain and of the captives.
Bombs.
On the heads with revenges upon
Bombs.
the enemy. For a fire is kindled in
Bombs.
mine anger, and shall burn unto the deepest.
Bombs.
And shall consume the earth with her increase. And set on the
Bombs.
fire the mountains of mountains.
Bombs.
I will keep mischiefs upon them.
Bombs.
Spend mine arrows upon them. They
Bombs.
shall be burnt with hunger, and devoured with
Bombs.
burning fever, and with bitter pestilence. I
Bombs.
will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, with
Bombs.
the poison of serpents of the dust. The
Bombs.
sword without shall destroy, and terror within,
Bombs.
both the young man and the virgin, the
Bombs.
suckling also with the man of gray hair.
Bombs.
And I will bring distress upon men, that
Bombs.
they shall walk like blind men, because they
Bombs.
have sinned against Jehovah, and their blood shall be poured out as
Bombs.
dust, and their flesh as
Bombs.
dung. See now that I am.
Bombs. Bombs. Bombs.
Who can utter the mighty acts of Jehovah? Who can shew forth all of his praise?
This peace offensive deserves a place in history.
Our passion is peace.
Only God can give peace.
I will utterly consume all things from off the land.
No valiant army and no skilled diplomacy can establish a genuine and durable peace without Christian principles.
Every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be rooted up.
Christ is our peace.
He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad.
Christ is our peace.
80% of Vietnamese people is Buddhist.
He that is not with me is against me.
80% of Vietnamese people are
Peace is not possible without the cross and without Christ.
I came not to send peace, but a sword.
Let no one mistake the American purposes in whatsoever. Our nation is dedicated to Christ's quest for peace, not the false peace of evasion and retreat, but the divine peace which comes as a fulfillment of striving towards the climax of commitment.
I came not to send peace, but a sword.
We will never falter in that dedication.
We need more helicopters.
What is Hanoi doing?
no response.
Jehovah, To whom vengeance belongeth, God of vengeances, shew thyself.
Cursed,
Therefore was the wrath of Jehovah kindled.
cursed shall be the fruit of thy body,
Yellow dwarf.
Criminals,
Scoundrels,
Atheists,
wicked,
Bolsheviks.
but they are animals.
Viet Congs,
communists,
blacks,
Bombs.
all shall die by the sword,
Fire.
fire and sulfur.
blacks, Jews, Mongols,
Bombs.
Cut them in the head, all of them.
Marxists,
terrorists,
Communists.
Smash the communists.
the hell with them,
Into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil.
guerrillas,
Depart from me, ye cursed.
Traitors against God.
sons of bitches,
Philistines,
Russians.
What is Hanoi doing?
No response.
Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you.
The brisk autumn twilight began to darken the Roman sky when a priest began to sing the ancient litany.
From the throats of thousands of cardinals, bishops, priests, and faithful rose the response, monotonous and devout. Forgive us, Lord.
At the rear of the procession, beneath a gold and scarlet canopy, Pope Paul VI marched wearing a red cape and carrying a crucifix set with 3 relics from the cross where Christ died.
When Severino saw me in that state, he said that in order to tame me, it would be best to use me too, as an altar. So they took me, and they put me in the same place where Florette was.